The room was buzzing with anticipation as people filed into the grand lecture hall at Harvard University. Rows of wooden seats stretched upward like a cascading waterfall, each one occupied by eager faces. Some were seasoned academics, their wrinkled foreheads and thick glasses hinting at years spent poring over textbooks and equations. Others were students, clutching notebooks and pens, hoping to absorb even a fraction of the wisdom that would soon fill the air. And then there were the curious locals, people who didn't have degrees in physics but were drawn to the promise of something extraordinary. At the front of the room stood Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, a woman whose name had become synonymous with brilliance in the field of quantum mechanics. She adjusted her glasses and glanced at the crowd, her lips curling into a faint smile. Her presence commanded attention. She exuded confidence, as though every word she spoke carried the weight of universal truth. Today's topic was ambitious, the theoretical limitations of time travel. It wasn't just about science fiction or wild dreams. It was about whether humanity could ever bend the fabric of space-time to its will. Dr. Marlowe began her lecture with an engaging anecdote. "Imagine," she said, her voice steady yet warm, "standing on the edge of a black hole. You're close enough to feel its immense gravity pulling you in, warping everything around you, including time itself." The audience leaned forward, captivated. She went on to explain how Einstein's theory of relativity suggested that time wasn't fixed. Instead, it was fluid, bending and stretching depending on speed and gravity. But here's where things got tricky. According to the math, achieving true time manipulation required infinite energy, a concept so absurdly impractical that it rendered the idea impossible. Her tone grew firmer as she delved deeper into the complexities of space-time. Curvature. She scribbled equations on the chalkboard, her handwriting neat and precise. Each symbol seemed to dance across the surface, forming patterns that only those well-versed in advanced mathematics could fully understand. Yet despite the technical jargon, Dr. Marlowe had a way of making these abstract ideas feel tangible. She used analogies, like comparing space-time to a rubber sheet stretched tight, with planets and stars creating dips and curves, and the audience nodded along, mesmerized. But not everyone in the room was an expert. Sitting near the back, almost hidden behind a tall man in a tweed jacket, was a boy named Ethan Matthews. At just 9 years old, he looked out of place among the adults surrounding him. His sneakers swung idly beneath his chair, unable to touch. The floor and his backpack lay slumped against his legs. He hadn't planned to attend this lecture. It was his older sister Claire's idea. She was a college student majoring in biology, and today's event fit perfectly into her schedule. Unfortunately, babysitting duties meant Ethan tagged along. Claire tried to prepare him beforehand. "It might get boring," she warned as they walked across campus. "Just try to stay quiet, okay?" But Ethan wasn't bored, not even a little. From the moment Dr. Marlowe started speaking, his eyes widened with fascination. Despite his age, Ethan had always been obsessed with science. He devoured books about space exploration, watched documentaries late into the night, and peppered Claire with endless questions about the universe. Now, listening to Dr. Marlowe talk about black holes and time dilation, he felt like he'd stumbled upon a treasure chest of knowledge. As the lecture progressed, however, Ethan's expression shifted. What began as awe turned into curiosity, and then skepticism. When Dr. Marlowe declared that time travel was impossible due to the insurmountable energy requirements, Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if trying to see the problem from a different angle. Infinite energy? That sounded like a dead end, sure, but what if there was another way? What if someone thought outside the box? Ethan glanced around the room. Most people seemed satisfied with Dr. Marlowe's explanation. They scribbled notes, furiously, or whispered to their neighbors, nodding in agreement. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Maybe it was because he was still young, unburdened by years of academic training that told him what couldn't be done. Or maybe it was simply his natural inclination to question everything. Whatever the reason, a seed of doubt planted itself firmly in his mind. When the lecture reached its conclusion, Dr. Marlowe paused dramatically before delivering her final statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. While the dream of time travel captures our imagination, we must face reality. The laws of physics dictate that such feats are beyond our reach. And sometimes, accepting impossibility is the first step toward understanding the universe. The audience erupted into applause, clapping enthusiastically for the brilliant scientist who had illuminated the boundaries of human knowledge. But Ethan sat silently, his small hands resting on his knees. He wasn't ready to accept impossibility, not yet. Something inside him refused to let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was a loophole waiting to be discovered. Unbeknownst to anyone else in the room, this seemingly ordinary lecture was about to set off a chain of events that would challenge the very foundations of modern physics. All it took was one curious child, armed with nothing more than a notebook, a pencil, and an insatiable thirst for answers. As the lecture concluded, the room buzzed with energy. The audience was abuzz with murmurs of admiration and curiosity, their minds racing to process the depth of Dr. Evelyn Marlowe's arguments. She had painted a vivid picture of the universe's rules, explaining why humanity's dreams of time travel were destined to remain just that, dreams. But now came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the question and answer session. Dr. Marlowe stepped back from the podium, her confident smile softening as she invited the audience to engage. "I'd love to hear your thoughts," she said warmly, her voice carrying across the hall. "Feel free to ask anything." Hands shot up almost instantly. A middle-aged professor in the front row leaned forward eagerly, his hand raised high. Beside him, a young doctoral candidate adjusted her glasses and waved her arm slightly, hoping to catch Dr. Marlowe's attention. Even a few locals who had come out of sheer curiosity joined in, their hands trembling with excitement. The moderator, standing nearby, began pointing to individuals one by one, passing the microphone around like a baton in a relay race. The questions ranged from technical clarifications about specific equations to broader philosophical inquiries about the implications of Dr. Marlowe's theories. One man asked whether quantum entanglement could ever play a role in bypassing the need for infinite energy. Another wondered if future technologies might render current limitations obsolete. Each query was met with thoughtful responses, Dr. Marlowe weaving through complex ideas with the ease of someone who had spent decades immersed in them. Her answers were thorough, peppered with analogies that made even the most abstract concepts accessible. But then something unusual happened. As the moderator scanned the room for the next question, a small hand wavered uncertainly in the back. It wasn't thrust into the air with confidence like the others. Instead, it hovered hesitantly, as though unsure whether it belonged there at all. At first, no one noticed. The moderator moved on, handing the microphone to yet another adult eager to contribute to the discussion. But Claire Matthews, sitting beside her younger brother Ethan, saw it immediately. "Ethan," she whispered, nudging him gently. "What are you doing?" "I want to ask something," Ethan replied softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of conversation filling the room. His cheeks flushed pink, but he didn't lower his hand. Claire sighed, torn between amusement and mild embarrassment. She knew how passionate Ethan was about science, but this was Harvard University, a place where world-renowned physicists debated groundbreaking theories. What could a 9-year-old possibly have to say? Still, Claire couldn't bring herself to stop him. There was something endearing about his determination, his refusal to let age or circumstance silence him. So when the moderator finally spotted the tiny figure waving tentatively in the back, Claire gave Ethan an encouraging nod. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "You've got this." The moderator approached cautiously, holding the microphone like it might weigh too much for such a small boy to handle. "Do you have a question?" he asked, his tone polite but tinged with skepticism. Ethan nodded, gripping the microphone tightly with both hands. For a brief moment he froze, overwhelmed by the sea of eyes suddenly focused on him. But then, he took a deep breath and spoke. What if you don't need infinite energy?" He began, his voice shaky but clear. "What if there's another way around the problem? A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Some chuckled lightly, amused by the innocence of the question. Others exchanged glances, smirking at the audacity of a child daring to challenge a topic so far beyond his years. Even Claire winced slightly, half expecting Dr. Marlowe to dismiss the comment outright. After all, this was a woman who had spent decades mastering the intricacies of quantum mechanics. Surely she wouldn't take a 9-year-old seriously. Doctor. Marlowe, however, didn't laugh. Instead, she studied Ethan carefully, her expression unreadable. For a split second, it seemed as though she might actually entertain the idea. Then, with a polite smile, she responded. "That's a very creative thought," she said, her tone measured and kind. "But unfortunately, the mathematics behind these theories doesn't leave much room for alternatives. Infinite energy is a fundamental requirement for manipulating space-time in the way we're discussing." Her explanation was concise, leaving little room for further debate. She thanked Ethan for his question, her voice warm but firm, before moving on to the next person. To anyone else, it might have seemed like the matter was closed, but Ethan didn't see it that way. As he handed the microphone back to the moderator, his mind was already racing. He hadn't expected Dr. Marlowe to agree with him. Not really, but her dismissal stung more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just that she disagreed, it was the certainty in her voice. The implication that questioning established truths was futile. Claire noticed the change in her brother almost immediately. On the walk home, Ethan was unusually quiet, his usual chatter replaced by a distant, contemplative silence. "Are you okay?" she asked finally, breaking the stillness between them. Ethan shrugged, kicking a pebble along the sidewalk. "I guess," he muttered. "But I don't think she's right." Claire stopped walking, turning to face him. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words. "She said infinite energy is the only way," he explained slowly. "But what if there's something she missed? Something nobody's thought of yet?" Claire frowned, unsure how to respond. On one hand, she admired Ethan's persistence. His refusal to accept things at face value was one of the traits she loved most about him. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. Dr. Marlowe wasn't just any scientist, she was a leading authority in her field. Challenging her wasn't exactly a small feat. Still, Claire didn't want to discourage him. If anything, his enthusiasm reminded her of why she had fallen in love with science in the first place. The thrill of discovery, the endless pursuit of knowledge. "Well," she said after a pause, "if you really believe there's another way, maybe you should try figuring it out yourself." Ethan's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "You think I can?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. Claire smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Why not? Stranger things have happened. Besides, who says you have to be a grown-up to come up with big ideas?" That night, Ethan retreated to his room, his mind ablaze with possibilities. He pulled out his favorite notebook, its pages already filled with sketches of planets, diagrams of black holes, and scribbled notes about the mysteries of the universe. Tonight, though, he had a new mission: to prove Dr. Marlowe wrong. Or, at least, to find a way to make her reconsider. He began by jotting down everything he remembered from the lecture, the equations, the analogies, the core argument that infinite energy was unavoidable. Then he started brainstorming alternatives. What if gravity could be used differently? What if there was a way to bend space-time without needing so much power? The ideas flowed freely, some ridiculous, and others surprisingly coherent. By the time he finally put his pencil down, the clock on his bedside table read well past midnight. Unbeknownst to Ethan, this late-night session marked the beginning of something extraordinary. While most children his age were content to dream about superheroes or video games, Ethan was embarking on a journey that would challenge the boundaries of human understanding. And though he didn't know it yet, his simple question, posed in a crowded lecture hall, was about to spark a chain reaction that would ripple far beyond Harvard University. Ethan's late-night brainstorming session wasn't just a fleeting moment of inspiration, it became a nightly ritual. Each evening, after dinner and homework, he would retreat to his room, pulling out his trusty notebook and diving into the world of physics. At first, his ideas were scattered and rough, like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. He drew crude diagrams of black holes, swallowing stars, arrows pointing in every direction to represent forces he barely understood. But as the days turned into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. His thoughts started taking shape. Claire noticed the change almost immediately. Her once mischievous little brother, who used to beg her for bedtime stories about dinosaurs and astronauts, now spent hours hunched over his desk, muttering to himself about gravitational waves and space-time curvature. At first, she teased him lightly, calling him Professor Matthews whenever he launched into one of his explanations. But soon her playful jokes gave way to genuine curiosity. One evening, while Ethan was sketching yet another diagram, Claire leaned over his shoulder and asked, "What are you working on now?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to share. Part of him worried that Claire might think his ideas were silly, or, worse, impossible. But then he remembered her words from that night after the lecture. "Who says you have to be a grown-up to come up with big ideas?" With renewed confidence, he handed her the notebook. "I'm trying to figure out a way around what Dr. Marlowe said," he explained. "She thinks time travel is impossible because we'd need infinite energy, but I think there's another way." Claire flipped through the pages, her eyebrows rising as she took in the sketches and notes. Some of it made sense to her. She recognized terms like wormholes and event horizons from her own science classes, but much of it was beyond her grasp. Still, she couldn't deny the spark of brilliance in Ethan's work. His approach was unconventional, sure, but it was also refreshingly bold. "This is really cool," she admitted finally, handing the notebook back. "But you're going to need help if you want to take this further." Ethan frowned. "Help? From who?" Claire thought for a moment before snapping her fingers. "Dr. Patel," she exclaimed. "Remember him? He's our neighbor, and he used to teach astrophysics at the university. Maybe he'd be willing to look at your ideas." Ethan's eyes widened. The idea of showing his work to an actual scientist was both thrilling and terrifying. What if Dr. Patel laughed at him? Or worse, what if he dismissed Ethan's ideas without even considering them? Claire could see the hesitation in his expression and quickly reassured him. "Dr. Patel's really nice," she said, "and he loves talking about space. Trust me, he'll at least hear you out." The next day, Claire arranged a meeting between Ethan and Dr. Patel. She explained the situation briefly over the phone, careful not to reveal too many details. All she said was that her younger brother had some interesting ideas about physics and wanted advice. To her surprise, Dr. Patel agreed without hesitation. "Bring him by tomorrow afternoon," he said warmly. "I'd love to meet him." When Ethan arrived at Dr. Patel's house the following day, he was nervous, but determined. The retired astrophysicist greeted them at the door with a wide smile, ushering them into a cozy living room filled with books and astronomical models. A large telescope stood near the window, its lens pointed toward the sky. "So," Dr. Patel said, settling into an armchair, "what brings you here today, young man?" Ethan glanced at Claire, who gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, he opened his notebook and began explaining his ideas. He talked about Dr. Marlowe's lecture, the concept of infinite energy, and why he believed there had to be another solution. Then he showed Dr. Patel his sketches, diagrams of gravitational waves interacting with space-time, hypothetical pathways that bypassed traditional energy requirements. As he spoke, his voice grew steadier, his confidence building with each passing minute. Dr. Patel listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Ethan finished, there was a long pause. For a moment, Ethan feared the worst, that Dr. Patel would tell him his ideas were nonsense. But instead, the older man leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with interest. "You know," he said slowly, "this is actually quite fascinating. Your thinking is very creative, and while some of these concepts are speculative, they're not entirely implausible." Ethan's heart soared. Encouraged by Dr. Patel's response, he asked eagerly, "Do you think we could make it work? Like for real?" Dr. Patel chuckled softly. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves," he replied. But I do think your hypothesis has potential. Let's refine it together and see where it takes us. Over the next several weeks, Ethan and Dr. Patel worked side by side, transforming Ethan's rough ideas into something more coherent. Dr. Patel introduced him to new concepts, explaining complex theories in ways that even a 9-year-old could understand. They discussed everything from Einstein's equations to cutting-edge research on gravitational waves. Together, they explored the possibility of using these waves, not as tools for detecting cosmic events, but as mechanisms for manipulating space-time itself. One afternoon, as they pored over a particularly challenging equation, Ethan suddenly had an epiphany. "What if," he said excitedly, "we didn't try to control the entire wave? What if we just focused on one part of it, like riding a wave in the ocean?" Dr. Patel paused, considering the idea. "That's an intriguing analogy," he said. "If we could isolate a specific frequency or pattern within the wave, it might create a localized effect, enough to bend space-time without requiring infinite energy." They spent the rest of the day fleshing out the concept, testing it against existing theories and refining their calculations. By the time Ethan headed home that evening, they had drafted the outline of a paper summarizing their findings. It wasn't perfect, of course, far from it, but it was a start. And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his question hadn't been so naive after all. As the days passed, Dr. Patel helped Ethan polish the paper, ensuring that it adhered to scientific standards while retaining the essence of Ethan's original idea. When it was finally complete, Dr. Patel suggested submitting it to a minor scientific journal, one that welcomed innovative, albeit speculative, research. "It's a long shot," he admitted, "but stranger things have happened. Who knows? Someone might find it interesting." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew the chances of the paper gaining attention were slim. After all, he was just a kid, and the world of academia wasn't exactly known for embracing unconventional voices. But still, he couldn't help feeling hopeful. If nothing else, he had proven to himself that asking questions, even when everyone told him the answers were impossible, was worth it. Little did Ethan know, however, that his journey was only beginning. Within weeks of submitting the paper, it caught the eye of a prominent physicist browsing the journal's online archives. Intrigued by the fresh perspective offered by such a young mind, the physicist shared the article with colleagues, sparking a chain reaction of interest. Before long, Ethan's hypothesis was being discussed in academic circles around the globe. Back at home, life went on as usual, at least for a while. Claire continued her studies, occasionally teasing Ethan about his newfound fame. "Looks like Professor Matthews is making headlines." Ethan, meanwhile, returned to school pretending everything was normal, but deep down he knew things would never be the same again. His simple question, posed in a crowded lecture hall, had ignited a spark that refused to fade, and though he didn't realize it yet, that spark was destined to grow into something far greater than he ever imagined. The ripple effect of Ethan's paper began subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was just a trickle, a few emails from obscure researchers complimenting the creativity of his hypothesis. Dr. Patel handled most of the correspondence, forwarding messages to Ethan with notes like, "See? Told you people would find this interesting." Ethan read each one carefully, his chest swelling with pride but also disbelief. Sure, he had hoped someone might take notice, but he never imagined this. His ideas were being discussed by actual scientists, people whose names appeared in textbooks and academic journals. Then came the breakthrough moment. A physicist named Dr. Lin, known for her work on gravitational wave detection, referenced Ethan's paper during a conference presentation. She described it as a bold reimagining of how we approach space-time manipulation, and praised its innovative use of analogies to simplify complex concepts. While she stopped short of endorsing the hypothesis outright, she acknowledged that it raised important questions worth exploring further. The audience buzzed with curiosity, and soon the clip of her talk went viral online. Ethan didn't fully grasp the significance until Claire burst into his room one evening, holding her phone aloft like a trophy. "You're trending," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with awe. On social media platforms, hashtags like "You Young Genius" and "Prague Future of Physics" were popping up alongside screenshots of Ethan's paper. Memes featuring cartoon black holes and tiny stick figures labeled 9-year-old scientist flooded timelines. Even late-night TV hosts joked about the kid who outsmarted Harvard. But fame brought challenges too. Some critics dismissed Ethan's work as nothing more than a child's fanciful imagination, unworthy of serious consideration. Others accused Dr. Patel of fabricating the whole thing for attention. For every supportive comment, there seemed to be 2 skeptics ready to tear it down. Ethan felt the weight of their words even though Claire and Dr. Patel tried to shield him. "Ignore them," Claire said firmly one night after reading a particularly harsh critique aloud. "They're just mad because they didn't think of it first." Dr. Patel took a different approach. Sensing Ethan's growing unease, he sat him down for a heart-to-heart. "Ethan," he began gently, "science isn't always kind. People will question your ideas, not because they're bad, but because that's how progress happens. Every great discovery has faced resistance. What matters is whether you believe in what you've done." Ethan nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He did believe in his hypothesis, not because he thought it was perfect, but because it represented something bigger, the courage to challenge assumptions. That realization gave him strength, and he resolved not to let negativity derail him. Meanwhile, word of Ethan's paper eventually reached Dr. Evelyn Marlowe. At first, she barely glanced at it, assuming it was another overhyped claim destined to fade into obscurity. But when colleagues started mentioning it in passing, some praising its ingenuity, others dismissing it as naive, her curiosity got the better of her. One evening, she poured herself a cup of tea, settled into her favorite armchair, and opened the PDF file. What she found surprised her. The paper wasn't polished, it lacked the rigor of peer-reviewed research, but it brimmed with originality. Ethan's central argument, that localized gravitational wave interactions could theoretically manipulate space-time without infinite energy, was speculative, yes, but not entirely implausible. In fact, certain aspects aligned intriguingly with recent advancements in string theory and quantum gravity. As she read on, Dr. Marlowe found herself revisiting her own calculations, searching for connections she might have overlooked. Her initial skepticism softened into reluctant admiration. How could a 9-year-old, armed with little more than determination and a notebook, stumble upon an idea that resonated so deeply with cutting-edge physics? It was humbling and inspiring. For the first time in years, Dr. Marlowe felt the thrill of discovery tugging at her again, urging her to dig deeper. Determined to get to the bottom of it, she reached out to Dr. Patel, requesting a meeting. When they spoke over video call, Dr. Marlowe was direct yet respectful. "I understand you've been mentoring Ethan," she said, her tone measured. "I'd like to hear more about his thought process. Perhaps we can discuss it further." "Doctor," Patel agreed, sensing an opportunity. "Ethan would love that," he replied. "He's eager to learn from anyone willing to listen." A few days later, Ethan found himself sitting across from Dr. Marlowe in a quiet corner of Harvard's physics department. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same woman who had once dismissed his question now wanted to hear him out. Claire accompanied him, offering silent support, while Dr. Patel joined via video call to ensure everything ran smoothly. Dr. Marlowe began the conversation cautiously, asking Ethan to walk her through his hypothesis step by step. Ethan hesitated, at first intimidated by the setting and the weight of her reputation, but as he spoke, his nerves melted away. He explained his reasoning clearly, using analogies to bridge gaps in understanding. When Dr. Marlowe asked tough questions, probing weaknesses in his logic or pointing out areas where evidence was lacking, Ethan responded thoughtfully, often surprising her with his insights. At one point, Dr. Marlowe leaned back in her chair, studying him intently. "You know," she said, "your idea reminds me of something I've been working on recently. There are parallels between your approach and some unresolved problems in my own research." Ethan's eyes widened. "Really?" She nodded. "Yes. It's still highly theoretical, but perhaps there's merit to exploring this further. Together." The suggestion hung in the air, electrifying yet daunting. Ethan glanced at Claire, who gave him an encouraging smile, and then at Dr. Patel, whose expression mirrored his own astonishment. For the first time, Ethan realized that his journey wasn't just about proving a point. It was about collaboration. Science wasn't a solitary pursuit. It thrived on shared knowledge and collective effort. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Marlowe became an unexpected ally. She invited Ethan and Dr. Patel to present their findings at a special seminar hosted by Harvard's physics department. The event drew a diverse crowd: academics, students, journalists, and curious locals, all eager to see the young prodigy who had dared to challenge established norms. On the day of the presentation, Ethan stood nervously beside Dr. Patel, clutching index cards filled with bullet points. The auditorium was packed, the air thick with anticipation. As Dr. Patel introduced the topic, Ethan scanned the sea of faces, searching for familiar ones. Claire sat near the front, giving him a thumbs up while Dr. Marlowe watched from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. His voice trembled at first, but as he launched into his explanation, it steadied. He talked about gravitational waves, space-time curvature, and the possibility of localized effects. He used simple analogies like comparing space-time to a trampoline stretched tight to make abstract concepts relatable. And when Dr. Marlowe interjected with technical clarifications, Ethan listened attentively, nodding along as if they were partners rather than adversaries. By the end of the presentation, the audience erupted into applause, not because they unanimously agreed with Ethan's hypothesis, but because they recognized the brilliance of a child willing to dream big. Questions poured in, ranging from technical queries to philosophical musings. Ethan answered each one with poise, his confidence growing with every response. As the seminar concluded, Dr. Marlowe approached Ethan with a warm smile. "You've given us all something to think about," she said sincerely. "Thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with science in the first place." Ethan beamed, feeling a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still countless obstacles to overcome, theories to test, and doubts to silence. But for now, he allowed himself to bask in the moment, knowing that sometimes the simplest questions could spark the most profound answers. The aftermath of Ethan's presentation at Harvard was nothing short of extraordinary. The seminar had been a whirlwind of emotions: nervousness, excitement, and ultimately triumph. But its impact rippled far beyond the walls of the lecture hall. Within hours, videos of Ethan speaking were circulating online, accompanied by headlines like "9-Year-Old Challenges Physics Titans" and "The Boy Who Redefined Impossible." Social media lit up with praise, memes, and debates about his hypothesis. Some hailed him as a prodigy, destined to revolutionize science, while others dismissed him as a novelty act whose ideas lacked substance. But for Ethan, the real change wasn't in the viral fame or the glowing articles. It was in how he saw himself. Before, he had been just a curious kid with big dreams and a notebook full of scribbles. Now he was part of something larger, a community of thinkers pushing the boundaries of human understanding. Dr. Marlowe's acknowledgement of his work and her willingness to collaborate had validated everything he believed about asking questions, no matter how impossible the answers might seem. Still, not everyone was convinced. Critics continued to voice their skepticism, questioning whether a child could truly contribute meaningful insights to such a complex field. One particularly scathing op-ed argued that Ethan's hypothesis was a clever thought experiment but nothing more, accusing adults around him of exploiting his youth for attention. These criticisms stung, especially since they often targeted Dr. Patel and Claire, implying they were manipulating Ethan for personal gain. Claire, ever protective of her little brother, bristled at the accusations. "They don't know you like we do," she told Ethan one evening, scrolling through angry comments on her phone. "You're doing this because you love it, not because anyone is forcing you." Ethan nodded, though the negativity weighed heavily on him. He knew some people would never take him seriously, no matter what he accomplished. But instead of letting it discourage him, he channeled his frustration into focus. With Dr. Patel's guidance and Dr. Marlowe's support, he dove deeper into refining his hypothesis, determined to prove that his ideas were worth exploring. Dr. Marlowe, meanwhile, found herself reflecting on her own career. She had always prided herself on being a trailblazer in her field, someone who challenged conventional wisdom. Yet here was a 9-year-old boy reminding her of the importance of curiosity and humility, the very qualities that had driven her early passion for physics. Inspired by Ethan's tenacity, she began incorporating elements of his hypothesis into her ongoing research, testing new models based on localized gravitational wave interactions. Their collaboration quickly became the talk of academic circles. Scientists debated whether Ethan's unconventional approach represented a breakthrough or a dead end. Some institutions invited him to speak at conferences, while others requested interviews for documentaries and podcasts. At first, Ethan struggled to balance these opportunities with schoolwork and everyday life. Claire helped him prioritize, ensuring he didn't burn out under the pressure. "You're still a kid," she reminded him frequently. "Don't forget to have fun." Despite the challenges, Ethan thrived in the spotlight. His presentations grew more polished, his explanations clearer, and his confidence stronger. Each time he stood before an audience, he felt a little less nervous, a little more assured that his voice mattered. And each time Dr. Marlowe joined him on stage, their dynamic shifted from mentor-student to equals united by a shared goal. One memorable event took place at a global science symposium in Geneva, where Ethan was invited to present alongside some of the world's leading physicists. As he walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause, a mix of admiration and disbelief. He scanned the room, spotting Claire and Dr. Patel sitting near the front, beaming with pride. Dr. Marlowe stood beside him, offering a reassuring nod. Ethan began his talk by recounting the moment that sparked his journey, the day he raised his hand in her lecture hall. "I asked a question because I didn't understand something," he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the occasion. "And even though the answer seemed impossible, I couldn't stop wondering if there was another way. That's what science is all about, asking questions no matter how hard they are." His words resonated deeply with the audience. Many attendees approached him afterward, praising not only his intellect but also his courage. A renowned astrophysicist named Dr. Elena Ruiz told him, "You remind us why we started doing science, to explore the unknown, even when it feels out of reach." As the months passed, Ethan's influence extended beyond academia. Teachers began using his story to inspire students, encouraging them to pursue their passions fearlessly. Parents shared articles about him with their children, hoping to ignite similar sparks of curiosity. Even Hollywood expressed interest in adapting his journey into a film, though Ethan politely declined, saying he preferred to focus on his research. Back home, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, or as close to normal as it could get for a boy who had become a household name. Claire teased him less about his genius status and more about remembering to clean his room. Their parents, initially overwhelmed by the sudden attention, grew accustomed to seeing reporters camped outside their house. They supported Ethan wholeheartedly, ensuring he stayed grounded amidst the chaos. Yet despite the accolades and opportunities, Ethan remained humble. He knew his hypothesis was still unproven, a distant dream rather than a tangible reality. But that didn't bother him. What mattered most was the process, the joy of discovery, the thrill of solving puzzles, and the connections he forged along the way. One evening, as he sat at his desk sketching yet another diagram, Claire knocked on his door. "Hey, Professor Matthews," she said with a grin, holding up 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan laughed, making space for her on the chair beside him. Together, they sipped their drinks and talked about everything, from the latest developments in his research to mundane details about school and friends. For a brief moment, it felt like old times before Harvard lectures and viral videos changed their lives forever. "You know," Claire said thoughtfully, setting her mug down, "you've done something incredible, not just because of your idea, but because you showed people that age doesn't define ability. That's huge." Ethan smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude for Claire, for Dr. Patel, for Dr. Marlowe, and for everyone who had believed in him. "Thanks," he replied softly, "but I couldn't have done it alone." And that was the truth. While Ethan's journey had begun with a single question in a crowded lecture hall, it had grown into something far greater thanks to the support of those around him. Together, they had turned curiosity into collaboration, transforming a seemingly impossible idea into a beacon of hope for future generations. As he closed his notebook for the night, Ethan allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. He didn't know what the future held, whether his hypothesis would lead to groundbreaking discoveries or remain an intriguing footnote in scientific history. But one thing was certain. He had proven that asking questions, no matter how daunting the answers might seem, was always worth it. And perhaps in doing so he had inspired others to do the same. Ethan's journey didn't end with applause or headlines. It evolved into something deeper, more enduring. As the initial buzz of his viral fame began to fade, he found himself at a crossroads. The world had celebrated him as a symbol of youthful ingenuity. But now it was time to decide what came next. Would he let this moment define him, or would he use it as a springboard for something greater? For Ethan, the answer was clear. His work wasn't done yet. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe continued to play a pivotal role in shaping Ethan's path forward. What had started as reluctant admiration on her part blossomed into genuine mentorship. She invited him to join her research team, not as a token child prodigy, but as a valued contributor whose fresh perspective challenged conventional thinking. Together, they explored uncharted territory, testing theories that combined Ethan's imaginative approach with Dr. Marlowe's decades of expertise. Their collaboration inspired others in the scientific community to embrace unconventional voices. Universities began hosting Young Innovators workshops, inviting students of all ages to present their ideas alongside seasoned researchers. These events created spaces where curiosity trumped credentials and questions were valued over answers. Ethan became a regular guest speaker, sharing not just his hypothesis, but also the story behind it, the doubt, the persistence, and the importance of never giving up. At school, Ethan faced a different kind of challenge. While some classmates admired him, others teased him relentlessly, calling him Professor Kid or accusing him of thinking he was better than everyone else. Teachers, too, struggled to find the right balance. How do you encourage a student who's already light years ahead without alienating the rest of the class? Claire stepped in whenever tensions arose, reminding Ethan that not everyone would understand his passion. "Just focus on what makes you happy," she advised. "The rest will fall into place." And so Ethan did exactly that. He poured his energy into learning, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. With Dr. Patel's guidance, he delved into advanced mathematics, computer simulations, and even basic coding to model gravitational wave interactions. His bedroom transformed into a mini laboratory, cluttered with books, papers, and half-built experiments. Claire joked that it looked like a tornado had hit a library, but Ethan didn't mind the mess. It was evidence of progress. One day, while working on a particularly tricky simulation, Ethan stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. By tweaking certain parameters in his model, he noticed patterns suggesting that localized gravitational waves could interact with quantum fields in ways previously unexplored. Excited, he rushed to share his findings with Dr. Marlowe, who immediately recognized their significance. "This could be groundbreaking," she said, her eyes lighting up. "If we can replicate these results, we might have a real breakthrough on our hands." Over the next several months, Ethan and Dr. Marlowe worked tirelessly to refine the theory. They collaborated with physicists from around the globe, conducting experiments and running simulations to test its validity. Each new piece of data brought them closer to confirming Ethan's hypothesis or disproving it entirely. Despite the uncertainty, Ethan remained undeterred. "Even if it doesn't work out," he told Claire one evening, "we'll still learn something new. And that's what matters." Their efforts eventually paid off. In a landmark paper published in a prestigious journal, Ethan, Dr. Marlowe, and their team presented compelling evidence supporting the feasibility of localized space-time manipulation using gravitational waves. While the concept was still theoretical and far from practical application, it opened doors to entirely new avenues of research. The paper garnered widespread attention, hailed as a bold step toward making science fiction a reality. For Ethan, the publication marked a turning point. He was no longer just the boy who asked a question. He was a scientist, contributing meaningful insights to humanity's understanding of the universe. Schools and universities invited him to speak about perseverance, creativity, and the importance of questioning established norms. Journalists sought interviews, eager to capture the evolution of his journey. Yet through it all, Ethan stayed grounded, crediting those who had supported him every step of the way. Dr. Marlowe, once skeptical of Ethan's abilities, now regarded him as a peer. "He reminds me why I fell in love with physics," she often said during interviews. "Science isn't about knowing everything, it's about asking the right questions." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring countless young minds to pursue their passions fearlessly. As Ethan entered his teenage years, he began mentoring other children interested in science. He launched an initiative called Curious Minds, offering free online resources and workshops to help kids explore STEM subjects. Through videos, interactive lessons, and live Q&A sessions, he encouraged them to think critically and dream boldly. "You don't have to wait until you're older to make a difference," he told them. "Start asking questions today and see where they take you." His impact extended beyond classrooms and labs. Policymakers took notice of his advocacy for youth involvement in science, implementing programs to nurture young talent. Educational institutions revamped curricula to emphasize creativity and critical thinking, ensuring that future generations would grow up empowered to challenge the status quo. Looking back on his journey, Ethan realized how much had changed, not just in his life but in the lives of those around him. Claire, once tasked with babysitting duties during lectures, now proudly introduced herself as the sister of the kid who changed physics. Dr. Patel, retired and content, marveled at how a single meeting had sparked a global movement. Even Dr. Marlowe, whose lecture had ignited it all, admitted that Ethan had taught her invaluable lessons about humility and innovation. Yet despite the accolades and achievements, Ethan remained humble. He knew that science was a collective endeavor, built on centuries of collaboration and discovery. His contribution, while significant, was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "I'm not special," he often said when asked about his success. "I'm just someone who refused to stop asking what if." In the years that followed, Ethan's name became synonymous with curiosity and determination. Textbooks featured his hypothesis as an example of creative problem-solving, and documentaries chronicled his rise from a shy 9-year-old to a trailblazer in modern physics. But perhaps his greatest legacy was the ripple effect he created. A generation of young thinkers emboldened to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. On the night of his high school graduation, Ethan stood on stage accepting an award for academic excellence. As he gazed out at the sea of faces, family, friends, mentors, and strangers alike, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This journey had been anything but easy, filled with challenges, doubts, and moments of self-doubt. But it had also been rewarding beyond measure, teaching him that true innovation comes not from authority figures, but from those brave enough to ask, "What if?" As the crowd erupted into applause, Ethan smiled, knowing that his story was just beginning. Somewhere out there, another curious child sat in a lecture hall, notebook in hand, ready to raise their hand and change the world.